members of the public gallery that this meeting is being recorded on live stream on the internet. The recording will also be available on Council's website. Gallery attendees are advised that their presence may be recorded. I also request that members of the gallery switch off their mobile phones to silent mode during tonight's meeting. On behalf of the City of Moonee Valley Council, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. We also extend their respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people that may be here with us here today. Councillors, apologies and leaves of absence. Councillors, I don't believe we have any apologies tonight, and Councillor Sorais has approved leave of absence for this meeting. Councillor Sorais has also applied for a third leave of absence, so I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Gauci-Marucci. Does it require a debate, or can I just put that straight to the vote? All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the ordinary meeting of Council held on Tuesday the 14th of August 2018 be confirmed? Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Nation. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Declarations of conflicts. Councillors, does any councillor have a conflict of interest on any item on tonight's agenda? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a conflict of interest in item 14.1 on the direct conflict of interest on item 14.1 in the confidential report, of which I have put in writing to the CEO prior to this meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor have any conflict of interest? Thank you. Presentations. Councillors, we have two special presentations this evening. Firstly, I'd like to invite Councillor Cusack to come forward to present a book written by Jose Ramos Horta.
I do it from here. Do it from here, Mayor. Several weeks ago, Jose Ramos Horta was in Australia, and I'm sure that many of us are well aware of who he is and the amazing role that he has played in his own country's development and ultimately the independence of East Timor. So he has dedicated. He's given us a book of his most recent book, which is Words of Hope, which are all very short little vignettes about leadership. And they're all important ones about sort of a world that is in change. And highly recommended reading for anybody anyway, so there's a plug. But secondly, that Jose Ramos Horta could think enough to inscribe in the book, and he says, to the City of Moonee Valley, in solidarity, Jose Ramos Horta. So we'll have that for our collection.
Thank you very much. We'll put that very happily in our library.
Cool.
Councillors, we have a further presentation this evening, and it's in the gallery tonight. We have Mr. Farah Warsam, the President of the African Communities. Mr. Warsam, would you like to present this award in appreciation of Council's contributions to the commemoration of the Somalian independence? And I will come around the front there with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Really, it's a pleasure for me to be here tonight and to present this plaque, which is thank you plaque to the Moonee Valley City Council for their support to Somali community in Victoria, specifically for the Somali Independence Day Festival, which has been held here, which I believe a lot of community members have attended for this, specifically the mothers and children who live around here. So it's a pleasure for me to be here, and I would like to thank everyone who have supported us as a community leader, as a member of Moonee Valley City Council resident. Thank you very much, and I really thank you all for all the councillors here. I know a few of them anyway. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warsam. Thank you very much. And we have one more presentation from Councillor Boone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On Friday night, I was presented for Moonee Valley City Council from the Country Women's Association of Victoria a book from Mitchell Group talking about their 60 years of service. So whilst it is the Country Women's Association, CWA, as a lot of people would know them, they do have a Essendon and Nidri branch, of which I'm sure you've seen plenty of times down at Wallace Mall. Thank you.
Councillor. Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to item number 7, petitions and joint letters. Councillors, we have one joint letter being tabled tonight. We have 2 joint letters being tabled tonight in relation to parking in Sydney Street, Ascot Vale. Who's got that one? I'll need a. Do I have a motion?
Yes, ma'am. Mayor, I move that we receive and note the joint letter.
Thank you.
Refer this matter to the Director of Planning and Development for investigation reporting to Council. And 3, advise the letter organiser accordingly.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Cusack. Can I go straight to the vote with that, Mover? Thank you. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We also have one petition being tabled on tonight's agenda in relation to a right-hand U-turn at McPhail Street, Essendon. Councillors, can I please have a motion? Councillor Lawrence.
Council received a petition signed by 43 residents who do not support the level crossing removal authority's right-hand U-turn at McPhail Street, Essendon. The signatories believe this is a safety risk to the community. I'll start again. Council has received a petition signed by 43 residents who do not support the level crossing removal authority's right-hand U-turn at McPhail Street, Essendon. The signatories believe this is a safety risk to the community, both pedestrians and road users. Recommendation that Council 1 receives and notes the hard copy petition. 2, refers this matter to the Director of Asset and Planning and Strategic Projects for investigation and reporting to Council. And 3, advises the petition organisers accordingly.
Thank you. I'll see if I can find a seconder for you. Councillor Gauci-Marici. Councillors, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. And we also now have a third petition.
We do, Mr Mayor. I have a third petition signed by 127 signatories for the following. There are ongoing issues with drainage in the Houston Avenue Strathmore area, exacerbated by overdevelopment, especially Henshaw Road and Kernan Streets. We've had no improvements to the drainage for over 40 years, and that the following be carried out. Conduct with Melbourne Water on-site inspection and assess the full extent of the flood problems and construct adequate infrastructure for flood mitigation. I table that, Mr Mayor. I can move the recommendation, receives and notes the hard copy petition, refers this matter to the Director of Asset Planning and Strategic Projects for investigation, reporting to Council, and advises the petition organisers accordingly.
Thank you. I'll see if I can find a seconder for you. Councillor Sharp. Councillors, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Public questions. I now ask the CEO, Brian Lancaster, whether we have received any public questions tonight.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There are no public questions tonight.
Thank you, Mr Lancaster. Reports from special committees. The next item on the agenda is reports from special committees, as there are none. So I'll go to the first item on tonight's report. And tonight's report is Council Report 10.1 on tonight's agenda is 59 Rose Street, Essendon. Construction of a multi-storey building and reduction in car parking requirements.
Apologies. I just note the report by Mayor and Councillors. Are we moving that those reports be accepted? They're on the agenda for tonight.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, yep.
Yep.
So I will move that those reports
Mr
be
Mayor,
accepted.
excuse me, if I could just have a slight amendment there. Because,
Sure. Would you read your amendment?
it's not an amendment, it's just one of the reports for myself, particularly the 6th of July. I wasn't present at the 50th birthday at Sam Merrifield Library, and it lists me as being there. So
Sure.
if that could be adjusted in the minutes.
So I will move that the reports be accepted with the deletion in Councillor Lawrence's report of the reference to the Sam Merrifield event on the 6th of July.
Okay, I'll see if I can find a seconder for you. Councillor Nation. Councillor, you want to speak to the item? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
Mr Mayor, if I could also make a announcement.
Sure.
Thank you. I might just stand if I may. The suburbs of Flemington, Ascot Vale, Moonee Ponds, Essendon North, Strathmore and Strathmore Heights all lie within the Victorian State electoral seat of Essendon. I've informed the CEO of City of Moonee Valley, Mr Lancaster, in writing that I, Richard Lawrence, am announcing in this chamber to inform my colleagues that I will be seeking election as the member for Essendon as an independent candidate for the coming state election to be held on the November 24th, 2018. I look forward to this election with enthusiasm. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Council reports 10.1 on tonight's agenda is on page, on tonight's agenda is 59 Rose Street, Essendon, and it's the construction of a multi-storey building and reduction in car parking requirements. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharp.
Move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, although I am dismayed at the thought of this building being demolished in Rose Street, I understand the location, where the location is of the site, and I also understand that it is in a commercial zone, so there's certainly no grounds to refuse an application such as this. The development proposal complies with all the relevant setbacks, which I think personally is great, particularly for the residential properties on Flower Street. The layout of the building works. There are no reduction. There's no reduction in car parking. Pretty sure. So it's within the preferred height of the proposed Essendon Junction structure plan. So happy to support this proposal reluctantly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, it does meet the appropriate levels of compliance for the relevant Moonee Valley planning scheme. It is a small site, and that is a concern in itself. However, it's not an overdevelopment height-wise. It's close to public transport services, including all bus connections, train, north and south, tram on Mount Road. The permanent conditions are helpful in reducing noise and the accessibility aspects entering within the dwellings, and also notated for within the buildings themselves. Landscaping has also been included as part of that conditioning, which is good to see. As I said, the development site only 377 square metres. However, the proposal is not onerous in terms of quantity of units, 2 one-bedder and 4 two-bedder. The location's ideal for development, close to transportation, and the impact on the local neighbourhood is not overly adverse. Finally, the lack of enough car parking for the commercial uses in itself is a slight concern to myself. However, given the many alternative transport options of train, tram and bus, this provides a good outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor to say a few words? Councillor Gauci-Merici.
I will just briefly, just for clarity, so the parking shortfall is 1 for the residential for apartments, 1 for visitors, and then 4 for the shops. Obviously for the visitors and the shops, there is hopefully reasonable parking going forward once the construction impacts finish. And as the other councillors have already mentioned, there's a couple of minor non-compliances that have been rectified through conditioning, and the small setback non-compliances are fairly minimal. So other than that, it's only 4 stories and it's not that bad.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor to say a few words? Councillor Sharp, would you like to close?
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just apologies for my incorrect description regarding the car parking. There is a shortfall. However, considering its location, still happy to proceed with this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council Report 10.2 on tonight's agenda relates to the planning policy framework for the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move that consideration of this report be deferred to a future ordinary council meeting.
Thank you. Do you have a preferred date, Councillor?
No.
Do I have a second? Councillor Byrne. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the item?
Look, only to say that obviously there have been some fairly significant changes at the state level to the planning policy framework in Victoria through VC 148. So we need to translate those changes into our local policy, and we need the time to do that properly, and so that is what deferring this report will enable us to do.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Byrne.
No, that's fine, thank you.
Would any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Marshall, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council Report 10.3 on tonight's agenda relates to the Reconciliation and Action Plan update. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation.
I'll move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the item?
Yes, I will, Mayor, and I'm extremely excited to move our Reconciliation Policy and Action Plan update, giving us a chance to take stock and appreciate the extensive work Council has completed in this space over the past few years. One of the key parts of our reconciliation policy, moved back in November 2015, was the incorporation of an action plan, which ensures that the document doesn't just sit on the shelf, but that Council is actively rolling out commitments contained within the policy. That specific action plan had 24 different actions, that including growing stronger partnerships and relationships, delivering a range of civic and community events, and developing land practices and placemaking activities. Of those 24 actions, all of them have either been completed or are on track to be completed. As you can read in the report, some of the highlights during this period include the establishment of a formal working relationship with the Wurundjeri Council, which includes ongoing and regular cultural consultations with Wurundjeri elders, which have enabled myself and officers to seek input and advice from the Wurundjeri Council across a range of social, community and environmental activities. We partnered with the Wurundjeri Narrap team down at 5 Mile Creek and established our now award-winning ceremonial rock circle, which won the local government award at the Helping Achieve Reconciliation Together Awards earlier this year. Another highlight was the development of a project with Avondale Heights Preschool and Kindergarten and the Wurundjeri team to develop a children's book called We Walk Together. And then we continue to grow our lineup of programs and events throughout the year, including our Incinerator Gallery exhibition, our Night Up flag raising event, and recently yourself and myself went to the Little Long Walk, which was held in Airport West with the childcare centre there, the kindergarten there, and it had the little 4 and 5 year olds doing a version of Michael Long's Long Walk down to Airport West Football Club, where they had a smoking ceremony and some activities for the kids, and that was really well received, and there were plenty of people there. Sydney Footy Club were there, NITV came and covered the event, and it was a really great community event on a lovely day. In addition to the update on the status of our Reconciliation Policy and Action Plan, the report before us also reminds us of the importance of Council having a reconciliation policy and our important role working towards reconciliation. It also details the work Council has completed to date in regards to engaging the Wurundjeri Council to work towards an appropriate event on the 26th of January. And it notes the initial talks we commenced back in May when officers and myself met with Auntie Gail Smith and Auntie Julianne Axford at the Wurundjeri Council down in Abbotsford to plan towards hosting a more culturally sensitive event on that day. While this is just an update on our reconciliation policy, in a lead up to the formulation of an updated policy in early 2019, it's important for Council and the community to note the extensive work that we've completed to date. In closing, I'd like to commend Samantha Buckley and her team on their commitment to rolling out every single action in this action plan, on the initiative they have taken creating event spaces and relationships, and their ongoing passion to work towards reconciliation.
Thank you, Councillor. And we also had a re-signing of our commitment to the Wurundjeri people here early in the month. Yeah. Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm more than happy to second the motion that has been put by Councillor Nation. I think that the first thing that we need to recognise in this municipality is the unique area that we're on and the unique relationship it has had with people of this First Nation for many, many thousands of years. And so as the modern day people who have arrived here, our commitment to working with the people who have had its custodianship for many years is a really important thing. And it's something that is unfolding. Our population in terms of Aboriginal Melbourne is growing, which is great. But we also are very much part of the place for all Aboriginal people. I am taking great heart from the fact that when I first started on council, our flag raising ceremony was hidden on the street at Callaway Avenue behind me. There was buses and trucks everywhere, and 2 cats and a dog used to attend. Now we have several hundred people attending and involved in NAIDOC and involved in the events that lead up to that. Gradually, as a council, what we're doing is integrating a greater picture of what our connection is with the Aboriginal community. One of delightful integration, one that is bound in hope and moving hopefully away from the sorrow and the sadness of yesteryear. But of course that can't be forgotten. And so in our statement of commitment, I see that we have 3 cornerstones in it, which are around respect, recognition and relationships. Gahoguk, Nahagrith and Jijeri. And they're important ones. And in the recognition part, there is that whole slab of issues that go to exactly what Councillor Nation raised, and that is that how do we address the 26th of January? And I think that in a lot of ways this council is showing a lot of people how that can be done, and that we don't have, we are conscious of the pain that the 26th of January causes that community, and we are also happy to work with the community to find a way to celebrate and talk about what that is. So there will be a very special event coming up on the 26th of January this year that I hope all of Moonee Valley people feel welcome enough to come along and enjoy as an evening thing down at 5 Mile Creek. Finally, I just want to state that this is always a work in progress. And one of the great things that is still hanging out there is the question of how we all respond to the statement from the heart that was put out by Aboriginal people not all that long ago. I'll finish in a second, Mayor. Not all that long ago, and it's something that we really need to continue to respond to at a local level and hopefully push across the whole of our country, because the treaty is important for everybody. It's not just a symbol, it is about how we've progressed. And I see this as one stepping stone in that forward progression. And really commend the officers for their fabulous work and diligence in making this come to pass, and appreciate our relationship with the Wurundjeri Council.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The mover and seconder have covered quite a few things, which was great, so I'll just keep this brief and to Rosehill Ward. Just in terms of some of the highlights from the plan, as Councillor Nation has said, the NAIDOC flag raising ceremony events at the Avondale Heights Library that happened earlier on in this year. This also went in part with how our festivals and events have now moved around the whole municipality. So I think that this is a really good sign of where we are going. Instead of always being held at the Civic Centre, it was great up at Avondale Heights Library to have everyone from the kindergarten or creche group right up to there was an elderly citizens group there and everyone in between. So it was just a fabulous event with activities taking place afterwards. And obviously, again, as Councillor Nation mentioned, the Airport West Football Club, how well they've got behind this, not only with the little long walk, but the smoking ceremony and the match day events that we attended with Nova Paris, Kyle Vanderkuyp and Courtney Dempsey speaking at. It's really great to see even the sporting community, everyone getting involved in this. And I can't obviously go past without mentioning Helen Vandenberg and all the work that Friends of Steel Creek do down by the creek, obviously going along with his action plan as well. So good job, Rosehill Ward.
Thank you very much. Any other councillor say a few words? As there is no dissent, I'll put that straight to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. 10.4 on tonight's agenda is Council Plan 2017 to 21 Progress Report for 2017-2018. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Cusack. Do I have a seconder? Oh, sorry. What would you like to move the officer's recommendation?
The officer's recommendation.
Yes, you do it. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the item?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I was a bit blindsided there. Thank you. First of all, the recommendation is simply to receive and note the report and the progress of the council plan and actions at the end of 2017. Pardon me, I didn't turn on my microphone. I think I'm skipping a few gears tonight. I'm not quite that well. But anyway, the motion is that council receives and notes the report on the progress of the council planned actions at the end of 2017-18 financial year. It's a report that speaks very much for itself. Most things are well in hand, and the council is moving along and progressing those extremely well. There are a couple of points that stepped out that you can see from the report where there are issues, but they are, I think, wise ones that we have looked at and are needing to address in other ways, and that is how the council is moving towards that overall picture about IT and the adoption of IT and so on like that. And there are good reasons why that hasn't progressed further than what we thought at this stage. But it is one that is high on our agenda. The other things that have left me with great interest over the course of the year is that the council plan has seen us develop our portfolio advisory committees further, made them work in a better way, and that our decision making is much more guided by community input. And so I commend to you this report and what has been achieved.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's a good start to the council plan up, which doesn't finish until 21, of course. And I guess from a business perspective, I can see that this is delivered in spades that I feel very proud to be associated with in terms of a council. The Winter Fest that was held in Pratt Street, Puckle Street, which saw over 11,000 visitors. What a wonderful occasion that was, and a great fillip for the businesses and the traders who often have a quiet time during that time of year. The ACON working space at Moonee Valley Library, the Sam Merrifield Library, was a terrific initiative that saw a lot of small operators come in and use a space that they wouldn't have had use otherwise. Council worked with traders at the Eston North Traders Association with the Leake Street Festival, which was a great initiative. Pity about the weather, but you can't do can't do anything about that. But I'm sure the local people, particularly around the Essendon and Essendon North area, really got a great deal of satisfaction out of that. Events were also held. Melbourne Food and Wine Festival. We were part of that. Melbourne International Jazz Festival. These are all new additions to our municipality that we really haven't had a lot to do with, and now we're trying to bring that all in. We also piloted the Stepping Stones program for small business to assist culturally and linguistically, I think I might be a little bit linguistic sometimes, diverse women to establish micro businesses. So all very good. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just quickly touch briefly in terms of what's been going on in the leisure and active community space, if I can. So obviously we've been doing heaps on the East Keilor Leisure Centre. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my dot points. Obviously $49 million, so that's coming along well. Walkability project, Dean Street Underpass, which I know was chaotic, but we got there eventually. Playgrounds everywhere, all over the municipality. The events review, as we have already spoken about, how that's been happening, but being able to have events across all of the neighbourhoods. And in your portfolio, if you don't mind me touching on, obviously we opened the Fairburn Park Pavilion, Fenton Street Hockey synthetic pitch, and we're getting there on Ormond Park and Boeing Reserve and Cross Keys. Lots going on in that space. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other? Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Mayor. I will just touch on my portfolio areas, which are strategic planning and environment. I've previously spoken about being able to cross one of the items off my bucket list and copped a lot of scorn for that, but I will mention it again, which is the adoption of the developer contribution plan. And we've commenced the planning scheme amendment process for that. So again, these things take time, but I very much look forward to that being part of our planning scheme. There have been very large numbers of street planning occurring and other greening programs around Moonee Valley, and certainly those of us who attended the Travancore Park planting, it was a magnificent day and something that the council should be very proud of. We are certainly getting there with our streetscape upgrades around Moonee Ponds, and the Union Road streetscape works were completed after a bit of a wait, but we got there and they are such an improvement for the street. One of the other important matters is obviously the consultation on the Moonee Ponds Creek master plan, and I did note today that there was an announcement in relation to that from the state government, so I'm sure we'll get an update from our CEO and hope that we get money out of that, which it looks like we might, fingers crossed. So that might be another item we can tick off on our list. And certainly some planning for water sensitive urban design projects in and around Rosehill Park and Woodlands Park.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Nation.
I will touch on some of the progress relating to my pack, the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity and Access pack. A couple of the highlights in the recent months have included the endorsement of a workplace gender equity position statement. Valley Youth also consulted with 63 LGBTIQ young people through a series of workshops conducted in the community and throughout high schools. It included the establishment of our LGBTIQ youth group. Diversity, access and equity principles were embedded within and throughout MV 2040 with the aim of supporting an inclusive city and placing a particular emphasis on the theme of fair. We delivered 4 actions from the Disability Action Plan. One of those was taking on paid trainees with a disability at Crown Street Stables within that social enterprise and supporting them to gain employment in the mainstream hospitality sector. And as previously mentioned, we'll continue to roll out items in the Reconciliation Policy and Action Plan to build a better connection to land and celebrate our Indigenous culture.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor to say a few words? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I might just touch quickly on My pack, the lifelong learning. My end of year report is we delivered 4 parenting programs in partnership with Relationships Australia in Flemington and Ascot Vale. Council was awarded a total of $470,500 as part of its community funding program. Our libraries ran a total of 1,979 sessions, which attracted 61,183 attendances, which is huge. We upgraded the Wi-Fi at 4 public libraries. We purchased 10 new iPads to support digital literacy programs, and we had a 23% increase in e-book use and a 34% increase in audiobook use. 2 events were delivered as part of Children's Week. Our volunteer implementation plan began. We trained 23 staff across the organisation in youth mental health first aid. And I recently was part of the Little Libraries video promoting little libraries that are popping up throughout our city. There's a couple in Ascot Vale at the moment, and there's going to be one up in Bruce Street, Aberfeldy. So they're popping up. That video has had nearly 3,500 views, so the Little Libraries are proving to be quite popular, and we're continuing this year to celebrate 50 years of libraries, our 50th year of our libraries within the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gauchi-Marucci, you're the only one left.
You know, I wasn't going to, but I best. I would be remiss not to talk about my portfolio given the significant body of work that they undertook this year. Obviously, the Future Communities pack has been fairly instrumental. Along with, all of the packs have also helped contribute, but to the 2040 strategy. A huge success for our council this year has been in the consultation that was undertaken in order to deliver the 2040 strategy, so I'm particularly proud of that. But in terms of the neighbourhood projects and planning, the pilot project in Strathmore has had great success. So they've had the street party, they've had the community ideas workshop, but there's also a very cool little online feedback tool that you can jump online and tag areas that you interact with that either need some work or are great little local gems. So that level of online communication and consultation and engagement has been really impressive for our neighbourhood pilot project. And just obviously also worth mentioning, the advocacy strategy was adopted in April and that we've received funding for some of those priority projects. So,
thank you, Councillor.
Mayor, can I indulge or ask your indulgence for a second, because while I moved the motion in the broad, I didn't get a chance to really talk to my my pack.
Okay, I will indulge it, but as you know, there's been no dissent, so you don't have a right of reply, but I will indulge you on this time.
Thank you very much, Mayor, because I think that the purpose of this motion is about our scorecard for the year, and the area of community wellbeing has also is intricately connected to all of this. And through the course of the year, there's been many new and building on older activities that have come to the fore. And first of all, there's the growth of volunteers in our municipality and the support that we're providing in that space. We've also implemented across our schools mental health first aid training to give literacy and capacity to people to be able to describe what they're going through in a mental health context, both as students and teachers and support staff who are supporting our younger people. We've also, in terms of the health thing, administered 3,623 vaccinations to 70 open sessions, as well as 11,468 vaccinations as part of the secondary school programs. We've also took a very momentous step within this council, a decision to maintain our aged care services while we're still in receipt of funding until June 2020. There is a strong argument maybe not to do that, but we took the view that we would need to keep working through what the Commonwealth has got to offer and how that is going to change, and not rock that boat too much because of the people who are most vulnerable in this community, and to keep it going. And finally, I think that the other big thing is that we're working very hard to make our neighbourhoods safe places to grow up in and to participate in, and that's an important part of all of our 2040 and the council plan.
Thank you, Councillor. As there's no dissent, I'll put that straight to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council Report 10.5 on tonight's agenda is the Essendon Gem and Laboratory Club location options. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Lawrence.
Move the officer's recommendation, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the item?
Just briefly, Mr Mayor, the Essendon Gem Club has been at its current location since 1985, 53 years, in a old brick pavilion that's got a lot of cracking and a lot of issues in terms of its safety, which is both dangerous to club members and potentially to the legal liability that this council may have. Add to the ongoing maintenance costs that could see Moonee Valley paying hundreds of thousands over a period of time to a fast decaying building that's really just patching up an old pavilion. Now, as it happens, I remember playing football when I was quite young, and this pavilion was there at Cross Keys, and it was dilapidated then, and so it just goes to show that we've been maintaining this building for a very long time. Now, the report also alludes to a possible shift to next to the Strathmore men's shed, which both the Essendon Rotary Club and the Strathmore Rotary Club have helped to build. And to me, that's a perfect fit. Having spoken at length with Rotary Club of Essendon board members of the men's shed committee, they are very much in favour of this relocation, as they can see that the synergy to both the Gem Club and the men's shed in Strathmore. So that's pretty much it. The report's very clear what the other options are to maintain what's there. I will say that this has been a fairly long and drawn-out process. That the patience of the Gem Club is to be commended. They've been, let's say, exacerbated a bit over the whole process, and understandably. So we thank them for that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, it's been difficult for me, I guess, to decide on this issue, but a few facts, I guess, have pretty much made my decision, I guess, to support this recommendation. That's the fact that years ago when we decided on the Cross Keys Master Plan, unfortunately, along the lines, somewhere or other, the Essendon Gem and Laboratory Club were, to a degree, forgotten about, I guess, for want of a better word, and weren't provided for within the adopted master plan. So it is a club that has been going for a long time. It's certainly a well-established club. And they do... So, like the Gem and Laboratory basis of what they do is very rare, I think, as a group, and what they do is very rare. So I think it's important to make sure that they continue to be able to do what they love doing, and the fact that they were, forgotten about in the master plan, I think to a degree we have to make amends for that. So while I am concerned about the money we will be spending, I do note that the pavilion where they're in now is completely run down. As Councillor Lawrence said, it's certainly dilapidated. And what we're going to be spending relocating this group is what we'll be spending to rectify the pavilion. So because of that, I'm happy to support this motion. Because I understand that if we do leave the pavilion there in its location, it will then have a flow-on effect with what has been adopted in the master plan. It will then flow on to the function of the soccer clubs, the cricket clubs, all the other clubs down there. So It's a big issue, I guess, even though it might seem like a small matter, it's actually quite a big issue and it's got broad repercussions. So I'm hoping that the site at Mascoma Street will prove to be a good outcome. I'm sure it will. It's certainly a different location, but certainly there's no doubt that being next to the men's shed down there will, I think, and agree with Councillor Lawrence, that it certainly be a benefit to the men's shed as well as these people in the Gem and Lapidary Club. So there's been a lot of toing and froing with me personally on this, but I've certainly come to the conclusion that I'm happy to support this recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor, say a few words. Councillor Gout.
Sorry, I was just going to mention, I think Councillor Lawrence moved a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation, which is not reflected on the screen.
Okay.
So I would also like to move an amendment, which is in relation to point 4, which is in the officer's recommendation,
Right.
for that to be removed so it reflects what's
From
on the screen.
Okay,
So I would like to...
that's fine.
Just point of order, sorry, Mr Mayor. It would appear that point 4 has been removed from the original recommendation instead of point 5.
That's what we're talking about.
Oh.
Yeah.
But you're going to add in point 4? Communicates to the stakeholders of Cross Creeks Reserves that the master plan will be realised in full?
No,
Yeah, that's what the amendment is.
to delete that.
Yeah. That's what the amendment is. Yeah. So
My mistake, sorry.
that's all right. So would the mover and seconder be happy with that amendment?
So
I don't have a problem with it,
Oh,
Mr.
sorry, I
Mayor.
need a seconder for the amendment. Do I have a seconder for the Councillor Gauchi-Marici? I'd like to speak to the item.
I will, and this goes into one of the life lessons I have learnt as a councillor, is to be very mindful about going out in advance, in fact quite a fair way in advance, making a promise that something will be done, when we know from experience that there are often things that delay projects. That point in the officer's recommendation is unnecessary for the purposes of this particular issue. And I think we just really need to be mindful about raising expectations that may not be met, because we've found ourselves in a situation before where we have thought something would happen at a particular point in time and we go out there and tell people it will happen and it doesn't. So I think it's unnecessary and I think we should just get rid of that point.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gauchi-Marici. Fine, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Now we go back to the substantial motion, which is moved by Councillor Councillor Lawrence and seconded by Councillor Sharp. So we've spoken to the item. Is there any, Councillor Gauchi-Marici?
Thank you. Now, if I could. Pardon the Rotarian in me with the pun, but the Gem and Lapidary Club is literally a gem that very few locals know about. It is one that I was really pleased to see and meet with the members of, and I have lived within 5 minutes of it most of my life and never knew it was there until I was on council. This is an issue that I really do see both sides on. On one hand, if they are to stay there, which from my discussions with the club is their preferred option, they're happy where they are, they're happy to look after that building. It's possible for us to deliver a compliant pitch without removing the building. And with maintenance upgrades, not necessarily replacing the whole building, but with maintenance upgrades, it's cheaper to leave it there theoretically. On the other hand, in moving, the new facility enables them to have a really long-term future for their club and enables them to build strong connections with another community. And purpose-built facilities would be there for them, albeit at a significant cost. The other downside for me, well, not downside, but the other thing I think that is important to realise with the moving side of things is that the club will need to start paying costs such as leases and security. So for me, I really do see both sides of this issue, and I really struggle with my decision on this one. But certainly in terms of us ensuring the longevity of a really great local club, where we would otherwise have spent that money doing up another building, I'm happy to support
Thank you,
the
Councillor.
recommendation.
Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Whilst I agree in principle with the idea of moving the Gem Club, I won't be supporting this motion tonight. The reason being is that I think why we got ourselves into this mess is because we didn't go out for proper consultation in the first place. We went out for the consultation, and obviously there was miscommunication between the Gem Club and Council down at Cross Keys. And as a result, I believe we were only speaking to one member from the club and whatnot. Things escalated and effectively they didn't get into the Cross Keys. And now what we're doing is we're saying we've got a problem at Cross Keys, so we'll now go and move you to the Gem Club, move you to Mascoma Street. And whilst, as Councillor Lawrence has mentioned, there's been discussions with the existing user, I don't believe it's gone out for consultation in terms of how we're using the nursery corner, to my knowledge anyway. There's plenty of people who might see this as great open space, the potential use of open space. I don't think and in my opinion, it would be better to go out, ask the community, not just the current users, in terms of what they want to use it for. So whilst I'm not necessarily against it, and it could definitely be the way to go, I just don't want to be back here in 6 months' time or 12 months' time with a different user potentially saying, hey, what about us?
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few? Councillor Cusack.
Thanks for your reflection on that, Councillor Byrne, but I think that the motion to move and to establish the Gem Club at the Strathmore Men's Shed is a sensible one, and there are a number of reasons why. And the concern about has the community been consulted properly in respect of Cross Keys. I think that the spirit of that consultation was always around the playing grounds and the purposes of what Cross Keys was to be used for.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can I just point of clarification? My point wasn't in terms of the consultation at Cross Keys, it was that there's been minimal consultation at Mascoma Street, the nursery corner.
Thank you.
Oh,
Point
thank
taken.
you for that, and I'll address that in a second too. But the purpose of the consultation around Cross Keys was always directed at what Cross Keys would be used for, which is its primary aim has been as a sporting facility, whether it's been cricket or football in the past, or the move now to accommodate soccer and cricket as co-tenants. The opportunity to make Cross Keys really work well is bound up in how the facilities address that, rather than address maintaining a Gem Club that is probably, in my mind, the building is dilapidated, will require considerable work, and is not part of the opportunity that we're creating down at Cross Keys when it's finally finished. And I think that moving it to the men's shed area makes good sense. Now, that is going into an area where there is already a lot of other work happening with the men's shed. It's not just the synergies as been pointed out by Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Sharp that come with this, but the men's shed is extending. It's building things like the Wicking Gardens and so on like that that are being used around the municipality and other places. And it's also a place where there is a new and moving environment going on. And the logic of being able to offer a wider service there through the Gem Club or whatever it may morph into is sensible. At some stage, I would have thought, forget just for a minute and imagine if the Gem Club didn't exist, that there is every possibility that there would be extra demand down in that neck of the woods for people to be able to be accommodated. We've got changing community, we've got growing numbers of people involved, we've got interests that would be catered or need to be catered for from all sorts of people who might come along. And we as a community and as a council have been encouraging people to cross to use all sorts of facilities, and this is one opportunity to do that. I'm not so sure that the community doesn't need to be consulted, but on the other hand, the community is well aware that the Strathmore Men's Shed exists, and it has a potential for growth.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you. Oh, my mic's on. Look, sometimes it is very frustrating being a councillor, and this is very much one of those situations where we're between a rock and a hard place, as my mum would say. And we're in this position, as Councillor Byrne has indicated, because there was a process which wasn't done properly, and there was a failure to properly take into account the interests of a group who had been on site for about 30 years. What we ended up, obviously, there was some miscommunication certainly with the club, and that obviously is part of it all, but you have to ask yourself how we find ourselves in a position where we build a pavilion that is not fit for the purpose of a long-term tenant on site, and it is perplexing to me that we find ourselves in this situation. And the reality is, as councillors, we rely on officer advice, and where it is incorrect or incomplete, it leads us to difficult situations such as where we are now. We had the situation not long ago with the Buckley Park Pavilion, where incorrect advice meant that we ended up spending $500,000 more than what was initially proposed. So we just need to try and work out how we stop these sorts of things from occurring. And certainly in this situation, I think that if we get change out of $500,000 for this proposal, I will be incredibly surprised. As we know, issues always pop up when we are putting large structures on sites. So again, I know that the amount is proposed about 400,000, but I suspect it will be significantly more. I'm concerned too, this talk about the master plan and what appears to be a slavish adherence to it, the master plan. I have to say that to me is inconsistent with what I have seen as the practice, where there have been variations to the master plan because things pop up that you don't anticipate, and this to me is one such instance where that's the case. And certainly Councillor Byrne has raised an incredibly important point. We're saying, well, hang about, we can't possibly deviate from the master plan because then we'd have to go out and consult with people, and yet we haven't done consultation in relation to putting a large structure down on Mascoma Street. So that does concern me significantly, and I certainly know the people around the Strathmore area really value their open space, and it concerns me that we haven't provided all of the neighbourhood with the opportunity to have their say about that. The issue around isolation and the lack of access to public transport is an important one, and that's been a recurring theme with the club, and the importance of public transport to their members. And I suppose there's something that's always, it feels inherently inconsistent about putting gems in what is a relatively isolated pocket of Moonee Valley. So I think security is going to be a very significant issue, and there has, as I understand it, there was a break-in at the men's shed, so we're really going to have to... Mayor, if you'd indulge me, I'm coming towards the end, so I won't be much longer, thank you. I think Councillor Gauci-Marici also touched on a point which really is an important one for me, and that's around the preference of the club. And certainly I understand there might be mixed views, but I would say that overall, if the club had their choice, they would stay on site where they are. And I can't help but feeling a little bit concerned that they might feel almost backed into a corner themselves, and it's, okay, this or nothing, and that does worry me too. I think probably overarching for me with this is that Moonee Valley Council is often criticised about not doing enough for non-sporting clubs. And you can't help but sort of throw your hands up in the air a bit and think, well, here is a long-term tenant, a non-sporting club who provided just something different for Moonee Valley. And it really appears that their interests have been secondary in all of this. So I
have to wind you up, Councillor.
Thanks, Mayor. For all of that, I find myself in the position that I can't support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. And I do take your point about being gems found in isolated places, and that's where some of our most rarest jewels and pieces of gold have been found in isolated places. So I do understand what you're saying. But
I was actually talking about the location, sorry, Mayor, and not the actual finding. I'm not sure how many down. I might have to get down at Nursery Corner with my little gold detector.
I also would like to say a few words. And the pavilion that they're in right now, yes, it is dilapidated, and it does. It's going to require a lot of maintenance. And I think this was just a problem that's just been probably brought forward sooner than later. So I think this is probably a win-win situation for everyone involved. So, Councillor Lawrence. Sorry, Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. It might be win-win for everyone involved. The soccer club gets their nice, full-size, compliant pitch. The gym club gets a nice custom-built facility, but then the ratepayers are up $500,000 for an issue and problem that never should have been. It is, as Councillor Marshall said, it's frustrating as a councillor that the master plan process, which in theory is so extensive, has somehow forgotten about a tenant of 30 years. Whether or not they were forgotten because the committee's older and probably aren't as actively engaged in the consultation process, should be no reason why, when we were moving the Cross Keys master plan and going through the consultation, that they shouldn't have been engaged and considered. And for us to get to a point where we're 3/4 of the way rolling out a master plan and we've got a building ready to be demolished and no home for the group that's in it, shows that there's been a serious flaw in the process. I don't need to echo councillors' comments about the Gem Club. The more I've read and learnt about it over the past 2 years, the more I really take an interest in it, from those older members who go on foster-king trips up to New South Wales, to the younger members who create jewellery and are actually running small home businesses, basically enterprises, through their work at the Gem Club. So I think its community merit is fantastic. The issue is that through our own incompetence, we're now going to have to spend $500,000, be it possibly, or be it under this recommendation, to relocate them further north, when we could actually look at the current master plan, tweak it a little and work out where can we spend that $500,000 on site to try to accommodate them. It's frustrating, and I completely understand the Gem Club's position that they just want some security. I can understand the soccer club's position that they want a premium pitch, but at the end of the day, the group that's going to lose the most out of this is the ratepayers, who have just going to get another $500,000 spent from council not following, or not diligently following, a proper process. And as Councillor Marshall mentioned, we seem not to learn by our mistakes, because this sort of seems like Groundhog Day. Every single time we've got a master plan, something goes awry.
Thank you, Councillor.
Could I just foreshadow an alternate motion should this one be lost?
You want to foreshadow a motion? Okay. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, there's been plenty said about this shift of the Essendon Gem and Lapidary Club Incorporated to 144A Mascoma Street, Strathmore. Let's just be a little bit clear over the cost. The estimate has been $323 to $403, not $500,000. So I just want to make that very clear to our ratepayers. Added to which, the Cross Keys Pavilion was recently handed a $250,000 grant and is being built to budget, and the bottom line of the building for the new Gem Club facility, if we take that grant into account, will be less than $150,000. So I think that in overall that this is a clear and
Just a point of clarification. Yes.
So can that grant be redirected to this facility? Is that what's been suggested, or is it has got a specific purpose
No,
for
I
which
think
it must be used.
I think Councillor Lawrence actually said that the grant was for the master plan for the Cross Keys
So it
Pavilion.
can't be, so the cost for this is,
Well, I think we know what he meant by it.
no, sorry, I was unclear.
I'll make it very clear, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, I was not
if-
asked, Mayor, I was asking, can the grant, and perhaps an officer might be best placed, be used for this particular project?
Okay, I will put that to the director. Natalie.
Thank you. And through you, Mr Mayor, the grant will have to be used for the purpose at Cross Keys.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence, we'll have to continue.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I appreciate that. So the bottom line is not the $500,000 that we keep hearing thrown around this chamber. This is, as the Mayor rightly pointed out, a win-win for all parties. The Gem Club get a purpose-built facility next to the men's shed in Strathmore, where the facility has already had all the electrical, all the drainage, and those difficult, shall we say, services that often, in an isolated spot, are hard to connect. They're already there in terms of being on site and close by where the men's shed is now, and next to it will be, assuming this motion gets passed, the Gem Club. So the Essendon Royals, the Cricket Club, get a correct size pitches and grounds, which will be great for them. The Moonee Valley Cross Keys Master Plan gets completed as per its plan, and that the Cross Keys Park becomes a fantastic result for that part of our municipality. So I commend this to my fellow councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour?
Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Sypeak, Councillor Sharp,
All those against?
Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Gauchi Morici.
And that is passed on the Mayor's casting vote. 10.6 on tonight's agenda is Domestic Animal Management Plan Progress Report. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Cusack.
Happy to move the motion.
Thank you.
Officer's recommendation to motion.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Cusack would you like to speak to the item.
Oh, very simply, Mayor. Sorry. Very simply, Mayor, the report that we have in front of us around domestic animal management talks about what has been going on across the municipality, how the management plan has been implemented and is going along. It clearly shows that there are a couple of benefits of this management plan that are coming to the surface in terms of changed behaviour from the community in respect of managing their pets and so on like that. We've got less examples of animals running wild and so on like that. We're seeing decreasing numbers of animals going into being picked up and being taken off to things like the Lost Dogs Home and so on like that, which is of great comfort because there was a serious issue a couple of years ago where there were a lot of pets being put down and of course creating great discomfort to many other people. It also, for me, tells me a story that in going forward, we've got the opportunity to look at how we form connections and synergies with other players in this area, and can actually work with other local government and so on like that. At this stage, there's not a lot of options in terms of this neck of the woods, but the reality is that with a growing population and with growing demand for people to have pets and wanting pets, we need to respond to them. We've done that already through the Alf Pierce Dog Park. We've looked at a number of off-leash places, and we're also working hard with, obviously, people around their cats and that behaviour. And over time, I'm sure that we'll see other things incorporated into this. For instance, in particular, the pets that are there for people for lonely people, for people who are recuperating from loss and various things like that. And I can see that being the next iteration of all of this. So as a progress report, there's not a lot more to say than I think that we're basically on the right track. All the indicators are going that way.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, just quickly, happy to support this recommendation tonight. I am an avid animal lover and always happy to read through the Domestic Animal Management Plan and the annual reports to see our successes, because we always seem to be improving yearly. Even though some of those improvements might be small, we're always improving. The MV Moonee Valley Lost Pets Facebook page is going well. I advocated that a number of years ago, and since its inception, I think that's made a huge difference in our municipality with reducing the rate of dogs and cats that are taken to Lost Dogs Home. Just so council aware, our officers, if they get word of a lost dog, they have a scanner with them. So they find the dog, they can scan them on the spot, contact the owner, and there's normally a post on the Facebook page regarding that. So it's been working really well, and I commend our officers for that and for continuing that, because it's been going for a couple of years now, like maybe even 3 years now. And when it first started, I don't think the officers were quite too sure how it was going to pan out. But glad to see that's been a success, and it's all about getting the dogs home as quick as we can to their rightful owner to save the stress on the owner and the dog. So thank you.
And cats.
And cats, and cats.
Thank
They're
you,
less likely to be microchipped, that's a problem.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Byrne.
Just quickly, because I note that this is something that is probably complained about to councillors regularly, is the doggy poo bags that are found around the neighbourhood, and that according to the plan, that at the end of year 2 there's going to be a review on where they are and how often they get refilled, and hopefully it will reduce the number of complaints that are received by council, so that's exciting to see. And also another thing that I picked up in this plan was the animal desexing vouchers. So for you to get your animal desexed, if you're a pensioner on a healthcare card, you can come into council and apply to get a discount voucher, which is great in terms of ensuring these things are affordable and accessible for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor? Councillor Lawrence.
Only very quickly, Mr Mayor, but the three things I like about this report is the nuisance dogs. I mean, the number of complaints I hear from residents about dogs barking and so on, I'm sure other councillors suffer the same thing. The dog attacks, the fact that it's addressing that very dangerous aspect to certain dogs, and the dangerous, menacing and restricted breed dogs that are also in the report. So I commend this.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor? As there's no dissent, I'll put that straight to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Yeah, sure, Councillor. Item 10.7 on tonight's agenda is delegation of council and review 2018. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation.
I'll move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the item?
I think the report's fairly self-explanatory, and it's a requirement that we need to review our delegations. They're laid out on page 93, and this enables officers to act under the acts and regulations that are outlined in the report.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lawrence.
No, I've got nothing further to add.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? As there's no dissent, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Next item on tonight's agenda is Council Expenses Report, 1st of April 2018 to the 30th of June 2018. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Marshall.
I'll move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Nation. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the item?
Well, the report does in some ways speak for itself, and as is always the case, it's pleasing after the delay in having these actually disclosed to actually see them there. I know there was some talk about whether we perhaps need to flesh out the description of the other costs, and I think that might be something that we need to look at. So for the next report of these that we get, that might be something as part of a motion that we consider, because I think, again, to the extent that we can break this down and be as transparent as possible, that would be appreciated, and we might even look at some of the other expenses too to see what might be appropriate categories to break them down into.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor say? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just I feel I should speak about my expenses, which are at $697 for the quarter. So phone and iPad, and then I did, I've taken on a year-long training, once a month training for women in leadership and on board, so which is the $471 and $20 of transport. So more than happy if anyone has any issues with training or conferences or anything. I'm happy to justify. If anyone has any questions, they're more than welcome to get in contact. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Marshall, would you like to close? As there is no dissent, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Next item on tonight's agenda is Assembly of Councillors. To our councillors, can I have a motion, please? Councillor Sharp. Thank you.
Move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lawrence. Thank you. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to the item?
It's purely procedural. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
No, it's as is, Mr Mayor.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? As there's no dissent, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Next item is notice of motion. Councillors, we have 4 notices of motion listed for tonight, so I call on Councillor Lawrence to present his notice of motion entitled Council Use of Herbicides.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Notice of motion number 2018/15, Council Use of Herbicides. Take notice that the ordinary meeting to be held 28th. It is my intention to move that Council receive the report detailing Council's current use of herbicides for weeding in Moonee Valley parks and gardens, particularly the use of glyphosate. 2, options available to Council for chemical-free management, including steam weeding. Do you want me to read the whole report, Mr Mayor?
I will take it as read.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Marshall. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Since 1974, when the production of glyphosate began, the use of this chemical in weed control has increased at an ever-increasing rate. The weed killer glyphosate is used in many different herbicides, and the chemical is used widely throughout the world, particularly in agriculture, forestry, and by city councils in parks and gardens, and by private homeowners. The key ingredient in glyphosate is a compound with molecular structure similar to an amino acid, glycine. These glycine products are varied and are included in cosmetics, pharmacy and other chemicals. Glyphosate is a non-selective herbicide, meaning it kills most plants that it comes in contact with. In 2015, the World Health Organization, or otherwise known as WHO, declared glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans. This means that glyphosate has the potential to cause cancer. I use that as potential only. The decision was based on observational studies, animal studies and test tube studies. There have been other studies that found no connection between glyphosate and cancer carried out by the EU, as well as other studies. Sorry. The ongoing debate about possible effects of glyphosate to humans will continue. However, the overall consequences is that those who work closely with glyphosate, e.g. farmers, council workers who are spraying, and are at a high risk of adverse effects. I could go on about all the details, but I think the main thing out of this that we want to find out is, and I stress that it's the use that council uses this chemical is done in a safe and a occupational health and safety standard. So there's no question that we are using this in a safe way within this municipality. And I've also spoken to council workers to that effect, as well as the CEO. So what are the alternatives for glyphosate? Number one, hot water can be used to kill weeds effectively, harmlessly and safe with no detrimental effects to the environment. Even my wife uses hot water to kill weeds. There's a steam method that is also similar to hot water and has the same environmental benefits, I should say. And we can, of course, pull weeds by hand, and also the possible use of pine oil in strong concentrations. Finally, the protection of the environment is the main consideration in all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Marshall.
Look, I am happy to speak in support of this motion, and I certainly think council should always be reviewing its practices to make sure that we do adopt best practice habits, if you like. There are current trials that are occurring through other councils which use herbicides other than glyphosate. And I think it's important that we look at what they bring up. One of the things that I do have to raise is the importance of distinguishing between legal and scientific processes. And as someone who did science and law at uni, I think that is an incredibly important distinction, because obviously the recent decision was a decision of jurors who probably are lay people without any scientific training. And obviously a decision of a jury is not evidence of a scientific fact. Scientific facts are established through very rigorous scientific processes. And so we really need to be mindful about that, because if that was not the case, then this motion would have to read that we immediately cease using any product containing this chemical. And again, I'm also mindful that the World Health Organisation have got that classification, but there are other things in that same classification, including red meat. So we need to keep that in, again, perspective, because we need to make sure that we don't scare people. And I think Councillor Lawrence mentioned that we make sure that it is used safely and appropriately in this municipality. So again, we just need to keep those factors in mind, but I think it's really important for us to always look at ways to improve our practices. So I'm happy to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I support this this notice of motion, and it reminds me of an incident we had up at Rothwell Park, probably at the start of last year, I think, where the weed spraying was a little bit overzealous, and it impacted the vegetation around. And I remember at the time, I think Councillor Marshall spoke to the resident about ways council could approach the maintenance and removal of weeds in an appropriate manner that doesn't use substances such as this, but it was more so just about what it did to the other vegetation, and the prominence of that particular park being used by families and kids. So it's very timely. It's something that citizens and constituents have contacted definitely Moonee Ward councillors about, and as the speakers before me have mentioned, it's very important to continuously review and adapt procedures in terms of ensuring safe and best practice.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor say a few words? As there's no dissent, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I now call on Councillor Marshall to present her notice of motion entitled TPG Small Cell Installation.
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, I would like to move that Council requests officers prepare a submission to the TPG small cell installations proposed across Moonee Valley, including addressing the following issues. 1, requesting whether the installation can occur in non-residential, non-sensitive areas. 2, potential impacts on neighbourhood character and properties within the heritage overlay. 3, compliance of the proposal with applicable planning and telecommunications legislation and policy. And 4, an analysis of any potential impacts of the electromagnetic energy generated as a consequence of the proposed installations.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll see if I can find a second. Councillor Mason. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the item?
I wouldn't have been the only councillor who has received a concerned email from residents in relation to the proposed small cell installations that are intended to occur across Moonee Valley. And certainly I know other councillors have also sought the advice of council planners. And the advice that we've had is that in these circumstances, the consent, if you like, of council to the proposal is not needed. But rather it's an issue about the consent of the asset owner. So I think that's what has been relayed more generally to people who have had concerns about it. But I think it really is important that we do make a submission and to address these particular issues. And while they are relatively small, there have certainly been some concerns around how they may impact on neighbourhood character, and there are some proposals for these installations in areas that are within the heritage overlay. So again, what that does to the heritage overlay itself. Certainly there is a really important point about making sure that there is compliance with applicable planning and telecommunications legislation and policy. And we spoke a little bit about science in the previous matter, and again, it's actually quite difficult at times for lay people to interpret these reports, and that's why I think it's really important that as a council we have an analysis done of any potential concerns around the electromagnetic energy that would be generated by the small cell installations, and make sure that to the extent that there are any concerns that they are addressed in a submission, and that we advocate quite strongly for any appropriate outcomes.
Thank you, Councillor. I will now ask Councillor Nation to say a few words.
Thank you, Mayor. I definitely am one person that has been inundated with emails, and I don't know if these installations are predominantly in the southern end of the municipality, but definitely those residents that have contacted me around the Ascot Vale Flemington area. And one of the downsides of the nice fast 5G technology that they're rolling out is that the actual waves can only travel about 300 metres. So rather than everyone bouncing off a couple of towers in a suburb, you basically need to be within 300 or 400 metres of a 5G, not a tower, but what they're planning to install. Well, I don't know what the proper word is, to actually pick up that 5G signal. And subsequently, that is why there are proposals throughout the streets of the municipality, and definitely the southern end, to basically retrofit these onto existing poles, etc. And that probably gives you a bit of a snapshot about how many are going to go out, because they do need to cover that sort of 300 metre radius. We don't own the assets that they're being installed on. Completely concur with Councillor Marshall that it's important that we put in a proposal and give some guidance in regards to their installation, and if the motion says if we can have them in non-sensitive areas or away from residential, not completely away from residential areas, but not straight at the front of houses, it might appease some residents. Obviously, these installations have particular guidelines, and they have to be within the standards that are set out in the Digital Communications Act or wherever they lie. But I think it is important that as a council we actually note that this is something that residents are concerned about, and through the means outlined in this motion, that we look at the impacts and put forward a proposal if necessary.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors like to say a few words? As there is no dissent, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I now ask Councillor Marshall to present for her second notice of motion entitled Commercial Car Hire.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I would like to move that Council requests the CEO prepare a report to be presented at an ordinary council meeting by the end of 2018, setting out options available to regulate and or manage the issue of commercial car hire share providers such as Car Next Door parking in residential streets.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll see if I can find a seconder for you. Councillor Nation. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the item?
This came out of some discussions I had a while ago, and then discussions I had more recently with residents who were dealing with this particular issue, and they weren't actually people from Shield Street. So I note the officer comments, and it appears that obviously it's an issue too in Shield Street in Flemington. We recently had the O-bike issue, which I think it's fair to say that council was quite proactive in trying to work out how we could manage what is in theory quite a good idea, sharing an asset in an environmentally friendly way to try and reduce congestion and all of those positive things that I'm certainly very supportive of. So I think here my concern is that we're sort of just taking a bit of a foot off, if you like, in looking at, all right, well, what are our options? And certainly we could go down the path of saying, yep, just what you do is you put parking restrictions in all of these affected streets, and that will limit their ability to actually park in the street for extended periods of time, or at all, depending on the parking restrictions in place. But I think we need to try and look at, are there any other options available, and is it a matter that we do need to look at legislative reform to try and regulate these particular options in a way which helps protect residential amenity while still providing them there? Because, I mean, we all know only too well the parking issues that we have in our southern part of the municipality in particular, and in other parts too. But certainly, I'm sure Councillor Nation and I would like $1 for every minute we have spent dealing with parking issues and trying to resolve some of them. So the concern of residents is, well, here we have a commercial provider potentially having this vehicle there, or for often extended periods of time, which can go contrary to the whole idea of the vehicles being shared. So I was just thinking about, all right, well, rather than having to go down that path of just implementing restrictions straight away, is there anything else we can do? Is it something that, again, needs to be looked at more broadly than just Moonee Valley? So I will await with interest the officer report.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nation.
It is one of the downsides of the shared economy, and the Car Next Door and O-bike were examples that while the sharing can be great, it's where that asset lies or is kept that can become the issue. And with O-bikes, that was obviously quite prominent throughout the Melbourne CBD, and now with the introduction of these car sharing services, close to the city is a great place to dump them. I should say dump them, to locate them so people can use them, particularly in suburbs where, like Flemington, where a lot of families, there's a higher proportion of households without vehicles. But then the impact comes on the residents, that you've got cars sitting on the streets, as Councillor Marshall said, and taking up precious road space that residents may require. So again, like the last motion, this is timely. This is looking at an issue that is starting to grow, and it's important that we actually understand how we can either address the issue or work with these providers to ensure that the impact isn't on those residents, particularly those living close to the city without off-street parking.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to say a few words? As there is no dissent, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I now call on Councillor Gauci Marucci to present her notice of motion entitled Occasional Care in Moonee Valley.
Was it because we took out the hyphen, Councillor Hyphen?
Yeah, confused me.
Take notice at the ordinary meeting to be held on 28th of August 2018. It's my intention to move that Council receives a report on occasional care in Moonee Valley, including but not limited to information on current utilisation at Shooter Street Occasional Care, including average hours per session booked, average bookings per month by child and family, usage rates over the last 5 years, the residential suburbs of current users, feedback and relevant findings from recent user surveys, data on single day only use of council operated long day care services in Moonee Valley, provision of non-council occasional care services within Moonee Valley, provision of both council and non-council occasional services in neighbouring municipalities, and opportunities to increase occasional care usage and availability within Moonee Valley, including potential additional locations for occasional care.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll see if I can find a seconder for you. Councillor Byrne. Councillor Gauci Marucci, would you like to speak to the item?
Shooter Street is an incredible little facility which responds to a real need in our community for flexible and affordable ad hoc care. Just a plug for those watching from home, there are places available. And the service is run by the loveliest dedicated staff who look after kids from babies up to 6 years old and caters for up to 23 children. So whether you've got an appointment, you need some respite, or you just want to grocery shop in peace, this is a service that isn't met in any other way in our community. Certainly we have services that will look after a child while you're at the gym or while you're utilising a different facility, but in terms of ad hoc occasional childcare, this is the only facility that I'm currently aware of. And certainly the dot point around the single day use of long day care facilities is aimed at understanding whether we are also using some of the long day care facilities because there isn't enough occasional care available. So in terms of the notice of motion, for us to continue to provide a service that meets the needs of our community, it's important to understand how the current service is utilised, how it's been used historically, and how it could be used into the future. Importantly, occasional care isn't something that's readily available, so understanding those opportunities to increase usage and accessibility is really a key part of the motion. If you have feedback on childcare in Moonee Valley, I'm sure some of the councillors have recently received emails or Facebook messages or phone calls, and you are more than welcome to continue to do that to us. We certainly like to hear your feedback about all things, but occasional care you're welcome to as well. And I really look forward to getting the report back just so that we can understand how our community is best serviced in relation to the critical issue of ad hoc childcare, particularly when we look at 2040 and the future of our municipality, understanding how we can have a long-term solution. So,
thank you, Councillor. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'd like to commend Councillor Gauci Marucci for bringing this into the chamber. I think that it's great that we'll officially be getting a report back on Shooter Street and occasional care in Moonee Valley. As a can't really say new mum anymore, but a mother of a 1-year-old, it is really hard to get your head around different types of childcare and what actually exists. And if it wasn't for the fact of knowing about Shooter Street, I wouldn't even know what occasional care was. So I think that by getting this data and looking at the consultation, which I understand is happening with current users, it might bring a bit of talk about the occasional care space, which I think the community will really appreciate. And then once the report comes back, we can decide where we go to from there, whether we keep it. I don't want to preempt a decision in terms of where what this report will come back with, but it'll be very interesting to see. I particularly like the dot point that Councillor Gauci Marucci has put in terms of looking at neighbouring municipalities. I think that that's exceptional, because someone might be doing something slightly different, in which we can potentially look at doing as well. So every council does things differently, and we may as well learn from the benefits of others. I'm assuming that when this comes back into council, I'll have more to say on it then, but thank you again for bringing this into the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor to say a few? Councillor Marshall.
I'm certainly very supportive of what is proposed in here, and I think it's important to be on the front foot with some of this stuff, because I have to say I was actually quite surprised to find out that there were vacancies at Shooter Street, because I remember when my older children were the age of your little ones now, it was almost impossible to get a spot in at Shooter Street. It was really difficult because it was so popular. Again, I can speak from experience at having to try and access other occasional care at the at Leisure Centre, Ascot Vale Leisure Centre. It is, I don't know if it's still the case, but it was certainly very difficult. And the childcare space is one that's always changing, and obviously there were recent changes to the various rebates that people are entitled to. And given the reality is we live in a relatively well-off municipality, there will be people that will be negatively impacted by those changes who might go, well, it's not actually worth me putting in long daycare now, so I will go the occasional care options. So I think this provides such an important space for people who, like I said, it might be that they are working from home and they need a little bit of a couple of hours where they're not going to have a child crawling over them and trying to type at the same time, or that they might need just a little bit of a break. And these types of services are so important for that, for people who might have no other support, mightn't be able to call on their mum or whatever it is and say, look, can you just come over for a couple of hours while I go and have a quick shower and get my hair done? You know, it's really important not just to think about people who might use it for work or for appointments or whatever, but just for that break, because we all know that having children can be incessant and it can be difficult. And I think that these types of services are just so important for that, amongst many other reasons.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words? As there is no dissent, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Urgent business. Next item is urgent business, and councillors, I believe we have no items of urgent business tonight. So I'll go to item 13, delegate reports. Do any councillors have anything they'd like to report on or in their roles as delegates? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just briefly, I'm the delegate on the Lead West Board, and recently, I've been appointed the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Committee for Lead West, of which Lead West is obviously an advocacy arm, and there will be some information going forward in terms of health and wellbeing coming up to the state and federal elections. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other delegates? Okay, confidential reports. The next item of business is confidential reports, and councillors, we have one confidential report this evening. So councillors, can I have a motion that the meeting be closed?
Mr Mayor. Sorry, can I?
No,
you
can just close the meeting. Councillors, can I have a motion that the meeting be closed to the public under section 89.2E of the Local Government Act 1989 to consider a confidential report? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Nation, happy to second it?
Yes. Vote to close it, yeah.
Councillors, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. You may be excused, Councillor Byrne.
Thank you.
This is where we say good night to members of the public gallery and those watching the meeting on the internet. Thank you for your interest in tonight's meeting, and we'd like to see you all next time, and God bless.
Fine.